In Korean, DOHE means opening a path through the ocean and moving forward together. This is the inspiring name of an EdTech championing group on a mission to improve society through better education. We discuss trends and how they are supporting the EdTech community and how their coaching-led acceleration program is helping EdTech startups to scale by first transforming the people behind them. Hello and welcome. I am so happy today. I'm joined by Yuliana, Lucy, and Omar, who are 3 members of the core team at DOHE, and they've joined us today. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for the invitation, Carmen. We're delighted to be here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Let's start by talking about what DOHE is and what it does. And I think, Yuliana, you are the head of partnerships, so you're really best placed to talk about the mission, the vision, and the strategy.
DOHE is a global EdTech championing group. It's really unique in terms of how it positions itself and the focus of its work. And it's all about supporting startups to make an impact in their context and help them to do that. So DOHE has 3 major pillars. The biggest one is EdTech Hub. We're strong believers that we cannot do everything but on our own. So it's about working in partnerships, creating community, and really bringing people together to help the EdTech community around the world. And just to say, we would love to support, through our mission, 1,000 startups in 10 years. So that's kind of our goal. So at least 5,000, might be more. But of course, within the EdTech Hub, there are various initiatives focused on engagement with the startups, with the wider ecosystem, and really finding out what else we can fill in the gaps and address some of the challenges the community experience. But we also have a Go Together acceleration program, which is very unique in the way it runs. It supports 300 startups globally. Every year. It's very personalized approach, and my colleagues will talk a bit more how it's structured. And it's really looking into in-depth conversations, understanding how we can support the startups to achieve their objectives and make an impact where they are. And we also have a Navigator, because everything we do, we want to really understand if it works, why it works. If it doesn't work, why it doesn't work. What data tells us. Supporting those startups. What actually happens to the ground. What are the information points we have to be able to support them even better. So the whole kind of ecosystem is focusing on engaging with startups, supporting them through different initiatives, creating community, but also creating a legacy, which then help to really accelerate, not a very fast-moving space. EdTech is not something that happens overnight. It's, it takes time to make an impact. It takes time to make things happen. So we're really looking how we can do it better, working together.
The service to the community is really phenomenal. Can you tell us, Juliana, what's on your to-do list to keep supporting the community in new ways?
I think the one thing it's really in our DNA of our team and our culture is keep doing. Everything we do, we reflect, we're learning from experiences and trying to make it better. And that's embedded in every single practice across all the pillars and all the work. So it's about understanding what are the contexts, the insights, the trends, what we can learn from those. What are the innovations supporting startups and how we can do it better? And that actually led us by working with the global EdTech community. We certainly identified some of the gaps, which then led to some of the new initiatives we have introduced. So, for example, and I know Carmen, you know really well, we do EdTech Together events, which Omar does a great job. Those are in-person, online events, and we're going globally in different locations. And it's really to bring the community EdTech enthusiasts together to have a conversation what matters to them at that point of time. And it's great because community tells you exactly where the challenges are, where successes are. We're very proud to engage, I think, over about 600 people in the last year attending those events. And, last event in January, we had over 200 people booked. So it's been becoming a real community to keep this conversation going. And through those conversations, we realized that actually community needs some trusted resource, something, the reference point where they can go and find the answer, or an opportunity or a connection which is relevant to them, to their stage of development, to their potential vertical of EdTech, to their location contacts. And one of the initiatives we've been working for the last 6 months, for example, is Global EdTech Resource Map, which is doing exactly that. It's trying to create a point of reference for global EdTech startup community to find the resource they need or point of information to help them to get to the next step or next stage of development. If it's related to raising finance, if it relates to finding particular partners, in the context, it relates to understanding the evidence and impact of regulations. So everyone has different challenges, different contexts. So we're really putting a lot of effort to create a completely free resource, which is available to global EdTech startup community to find a potential answer. Or if they cannot find, tell us what they're looking for, because we want to improve it and make it better. A global EdTech resource map, on EdTech Hub, please do check it out. And we would love to hear your feedback, but also the feedback from the community.
Yuliana, so you have a real overview of all the activities. You're seeing so much of the sector and EdTech. I'd like to get your view on what you see in terms of innovation. What are the trends in EdTech at the moment?
Yeah, sure. I think it's the importance of seeing the trends and engaging is a team effort. But what we're seeing the trends is really interesting because it's evolving so much. We see a lot of attention goes to AI, of course, but a lot of attention goes to skills training agenda. And it seems to be a global trend. In UK, there's a lot of focus from government perspective, new legislation, how the training budgets are spread and how control of them is taken. So I think it's quite an exciting time because there is finally an overall focus on actually upskilling. It doesn't matter where you are on that journey. And that's a fantastic opportunity for EdTech startups to really maximize that trend, jump on the trend, create solutions which really matters. AI, as I've mentioned, also get a lot of attention for good and bad. It's a conversation to have. It's an exciting time in terms of technological development, but also it represents a lot of challenges. For example, across Europe, we see there's a lot of debates around data protection, confidentiality issues. AI Act's been introduced just, year before last, and there's a lot of complexity around it. There's a lot of confusion around it. So we see this kind of excitement, but at the same time, there is an eager to make sure that actual focus is on making an impact rather than quick wins or quick money. And that's why it's so important to work together. But that's kind of things we're noticing and have conversations around that. Definitely upskilling agenda. Training is substantial there. There's lots of opportunity there. It doesn't say that K-12 doesn't get attention. Some of the geographical area K-12 is fantastic opportunity. For example, in Hong Kong, we see the government putting a lot of money into schools. Go and do whatever you feel is needed. It's flexible. It's your budget. Go and explore. And on the other side, we see some more controlling issues. So that's why it's really important to take the context into the conversation as well.
And specifically talking about AI, what are your thoughts in terms of how AI is affecting innovation in EdTech?
I would say is if before we've seen AI is a buzzword and we just need to integrate it somehow and use it, where now there is more focus on evidence and really understanding the impact of usage, where and how it's used. So, for example, even if we're looking at the data, is it learner data? Is it around learning data? Is it a process data, etc.? So there are AI provided an opportunity to look into various elements of enhancing the startup, not just make it scalable and do things quicker. We see really interesting developments around AI, and there's more around quality, in-depth quality, real impacts. And that's also coming from the partnerships. So, for example, we do lots of work with Global EdTech Testbed Network, which is focusing on evidence, real evidence, understanding that evidence, and setting testbed environments to be able to startups to go through that validation journey with the research expertise to really understand that evidence piece. So I think there's more and more things happening and more organizations come together to be able to provide that quality working together so that solution actually makes an impact.
Lucy, whilst we are on the subject of trends in innovation in EdTech, I'd love to hear what trends are you observing at the moment?
I think, and this is just a personal observation, that we're seeing more and more solutions where tech is used for good. And Yuliana touched on kind of supporting maybe marginalized communities or, groups that have been traditionally maybe left out in the mainstream education. And technology has opened up massive potential in supporting those groups. So there's a big chunk of the startups that we work with that are somehow focusing on more accessible education, supporting people with difficulties or learning needs, making sure that communities that traditionally would be excluded from accessing something specific now have access. But also kind of things around the skills and the job markets, and again, how to ensure that everyone's got access to those opportunities. And I definitely have seen more and more solutions and technologies being developed around those themes, which is great. And I think that's what we're here to support, because, as Yuliana had said, the mission is about championing startups to better society. So I think this is exactly what we're seeing. The other thing I've noticed is that AI is just a given now. It's not even a question whether AI is somehow used as part of the solution, or it just is. And it's certainly used both in terms of the products themselves or the services, but also in terms of how businesses are run. I think the amount of automation and that kind of creates lots of opportunities as well. It's about kind of the team structures, for example, speed of working, etc. But it's just become a commonplace, I think, that it's not just about using AI to create a solution, but it's using AI to operate on a day-to-day basis. I think that's just become norm everywhere. We all experiencing it in our day-to-day. So I think it's just reflected in what we're seeing with the startups and businesses.
Lucy, I'm going to carry on with you and going back to one of the key activities that Yuliana has touched on, but you're really best placed to give us a deeper insight into the acceleration program that you run. Could you tell us what it is about and what is it like for an EdTech startup to be part of your acceleration program?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the question. So we are, in fact, in our second year of running Accelerator program. In our first year, we supported 100 startups. Second year was 200, and this year we're planning on kind of 300 in a year. And our program is structured in kind of 26 weeks, and I will talk about what happens in those 26 weeks and maybe how it's different from other accelerator programs out there. So we work with EdTech startups and we provide business diagnosis for them. So there is a whole kind of diagnosis stage where there's a deep dive into their business, into anything to do with product, market, customer, their kind of general business focus. And we screen quite heavily for the right type of people to come and benefit from our programs. And once they've gone through the business diagnosis, we work with the founders to set key business objectives for the program. And the whole point of the 20-week acceleration after this first 6 weeks of diagnosis is to try and help the founders progress as much towards the key objectives or achieve the key objectives that they've set, whilst also helping them to develop and grow as founders. So the key difference, I suppose, is that the focus isn't just on their business, but it's both on the founder and the business. And this comes from the belief that if there are kind of thriving founders, they're more likely to run thriving businesses. So coaching is the approach that we choose to support founders. So we don't do business mentoring. We don't do kind of a consultancy type of work specifically. We coach the founders. And I suppose that's what makes us different from majority of the accelerator, where maybe business mentoring is more common. And it's probably what creates the biggest impact for founders. Because in the coaching space, whilst we focus on the individual, on the person in front of us as coaches when we work with them, and we help them navigate the complexities that they face as startup founders, we are able to help them see how they could be autonomous in their decision makings, how they can develop their thinking around how to approach business challenges. And it really transforms them personally as well as kind of helps grow the business.
And Lucy, this is such a unique acceleration program with a unique approach. Could you talk about the breadth of objectives that EdTech startups work to as part of this acceleration program?
Yeah, so we in fact have developed a methodology around the objectives, and at the moment we've kind of grouped them into a list of 25 real key objectives that we see founders struggling with time and time again. And they're obviously related to different parts of running the business. So some objectives are linked to the product itself, some of them are linked to the market, some of them are linked to the customers and their journey, some of them are linked to the team and just generic business development. So they're kind of all those types of things that you would expect a business, particularly at an early stage, to work on. But as I mentioned, early stage, we also have kind of objectives based on where the business is at. So obviously you'll be working on different things if you're still building your MVP as opposed to someone who's already launched and has got a product in the market. So again, this is what makes us unique, because we tailor the objectives to the need of the founder and their business. Whereas in other programs, you might have almost like a blueprint of this is what you do and this is where you need to kind of what you need to cover and in this order. I think that doesn't always work because not everybody's journey is linear. Startup journeys tend to be chaotic and all over the place. So I think it's really important for us to also see what the starting point is, what the founders already know or have done or have achieved or what they're doing well, where they've got gaps, and how we can support them in kind of filling those gaps, but also growing and moving towards the goals and objectives that they set themselves to achieve. So, it could be super varied. One startup might be working on clarifying their value proposition or testing their product market fit, whereas another one might be working on building their team or on their go-to-market strategy. There's kind of the examples of things that people would be working on, but we would then tailor the objectives to the specific startup business and the needs and also the context, because we are supporting startups globally, and the kind of geographical, cultural context, the market demands and needs are different depending where you're operating or where you're kind of running your business. So I'd say there is a generic set of about 25 areas that we know we need to support startups with, but we then kind of tailor them and make them quite individualized.
So Lucy, I would love to hear some examples where you've seen how transformation happens through the program. I'm sure there are lots of cases, but just let's start with one.
Gosh, there's loads, like you said, but I'm just going to start with framing the impact of coaching and then giving you a very specific example there. I talked about the personalization and the tailored approach and the fact that coaching works with the person that's right there in front of you in the context of their business. And before coming to this recording session, I've just coached a founder. Actually, I had a coaching session, and they came with a challenge of trying to reach their customers. They've got their MVP. They're trying to see what, who they can test it with, and they're trying to put their product in front of people, but they're really struggling with the exposure piece and finding the right networks, finding the right people. And we were having conversations about the kind of key challenges there and what's difficult. And the founder had said something along the lines of, I was told this is how you do cold calling and sales. And they had like a kind of a given view of how they need to work and operate. And as a coach, I inquired about how comfortable that was, that particular approach, and what results it was giving them. And the answer was, well, I hate it and I don't have any results from it. So as a coach, again, I challenge and say, so why would you continue doing this? And what are other ways of looking at the same issue? And it was just reframing the approach. And again, it's not one size fits all. So what had worked for someone else who probably in a really good faith had suggested this, gave advice to this founder about this is how you should be doing stuff, clearly is the last thing this particular founder should be, because it just wasn't a solution for them or a way of approaching it. And through the coaching and through just kind of exploring the things around this, you're able to find solutions that work for them, for that specific person, for that specific business, for that specific context. And I think that wouldn't have happened in other interventions, for example. And the other bit there was around the founder then identifying ways forward here. So identifying their own way of trying to address whatever the challenge was in front of them. And again, for me, that's the kind of summary of what coaching does. It provides the autonomy, the independence, the ability to be able to reflect on what is actually going on and identify own solutions. So that was just kind of like, because that was very fresh and has just happened.
Yeah, thank you so much for that case, Lucy. I think it shows really well how you are supporting a particular space, which is between going from theory and things that you might have been told, but then actually going to finding your solution contextualized in your own practice. And that has a real transformational power. So thank you for that example. I think it's a great one. I know that DOHE pays a lot of attention to impact and it's evaluating it internally. So in what other ways would you describe the impact of coaching and what you're seeing in terms of the growth of the founders and their startups?
I think the impact of the dedicated coach and the regular coaching sessions is kind of twofold. It gives you accountability. So you have someone who will be speaking to you every week for 90 minutes, and they will be asking you about all the things that you said you'll do and why you've done them or haven't done them and what was in your way. So there is someone that is always there kind of cheering you on, pushing you out of your comfort zone, challenging you, but also holding you accountable to the things that you want to do, which in itself means that you accelerate the business because you do. And we see that time and time again, that the founders kind of say that that's one of the most valuable things is the discipline of that regular accountability check-in. But the other side of having that dedicated space is the time to think and time to slow down. And that is such a gift to a lot of the founders because in their day-to-day, it's always about what's the next thing to do. And there's another thing to do and another thing, that they're usually super, super busy. You know, there's so many things that require their attention and they're often trying to fill in multiple roles, particularly if they're solo founders or if they're just starting, it's a small founding team. They're doing everything for everyone, and they often don't have that time to kind of stop and focus. So the coaching enables that question around not just what is the next thing to do, but is that the right thing to do? And is that the right approach? And if it's not the right thing, what is? And how would you know? And reflecting and being aware of what is happening and understanding decision-making processes, understanding how you as a founder operate and what is useful for your business and what isn't. And I think that is often the piece that kind of creates the breakthrough moments for founders in the coaching space, where an example again is, you know, focusing on something. I'm going to be kind of pushing this product forward and I'm going to really kind of create all these lovely features. I again had a founder who was so focused on the technical development of the product, but had actually never put anything in front of the users and the customers. And what had happened to them in the coaching space was that maybe I should put this in front of the customer. They came back the following week and they said, I saw a friend of mine use my app and it was a disaster. It was like the really, I noticed all the things that weren't working, all the user experience being wrong, and I was focusing on the wrong things. I was focusing on the back end, I was focusing on developing more and more features, and I wasn't focusing on the user experience and what I actually thought of it, and the fact that the user journey was super complicated and they didn't know what to do next. So sometimes those kind of moments of pausing and slowing down is what then speeds you up. And it is probably counterintuitive, but that's what coaching enables founders to do. So again, a great example of something really simple and small that just made a huge difference to the founder and their business results.
Lucy, thank you so much for that explanation of how coaching is impacting founders and their startups. It's really so. Now, Omar, last but not least, let's talk about your role as alumni lead and then your thoughts on impact.
Sure. So firstly, this role has been created as there was a realization that as we are developing along the program, because Carmen, you and I first engaged as I was a program manager initially across 2 cohorts, supporting the startups through that acceleration program, we realized that once they finish, then that's actually where their real journey begins. And the whole one of the very big positives and areas of opportunity, as Dr. Yuliana has described a number of times, is the fact that we have such a large community. And it's a community that's growing very fast and is growing exponentially and is so diverse and spread around the world. So there needs to be a dedicated, not just resource, but there needs to be a real commitment to making sure that we can follow up on these startups and these founders once they complete the program, because that's actually going to be the majority of their engagement and touch points with us. So currently, so that's kind of the context behind my role and where that role comes from. Now, the point you've made about impact, and we've used some terminologies like measuring and some technical terms. This was actually the first question I had when this role started, that, we're going to have surveys, we're going to have metrics, we're going to have all kinds of different things to analyze, this, that, the other. But actually what was found was that the most important phase right now, phase 1, is the relationship building. So what I'm focusing on right now is actually to see not just the startups and alumni which have finished my cohort at the time, but even the legacy and sort of the initial cohort members from all the way from cohort 1, and we are now just had cohort 17 finished. So approximately 200 startups and 200 plus founders, trying to just get to know them first and develop a relationship with them and see how can we actually help you. So my approach has been, in terms of my sort of methodology behind it, is one that, okay, first of all, what is next once you finish the program and now you're going to be coming towards the end of this coaching? What kind of help do you directly need, with no limits in mind? And then, what kind of support have you seen from other programs or from other initiatives which you think DOHE can implement or DOHE can learn from? So that's kind of what my work has been. And it's been quite a mixture of things, from things that we already expect, which you also received when you were working with your founders, opportunities to funding and finance, to then this shift towards more practical and operational points, such as hiring opportunities, ways to share vacancies, opportunities to find co-founders. And we've even had founders who have connected through our networking events for alumni and then gone on to look towards creating a startup together within the space of EdTech, because they almost use this pool as a way of kind of filtering out and validating the kind of founders and people they wish to work with. So I think, it's been quite an exciting phase. And I think what's so important with the way DOHE works is the fact that we'd like to make sure that we, take our time and focus on what we're doing, why we're doing, and what the purpose is, and how can we give back as much as possible. So really the focus has been on this, developing the relationships, building this community. And in terms of tangible points, it's gone from a place of me trying to almost at times feel like, am I like cold calling like a salesman, trying to reach out to people, to now a very active Slack community with over 200 members where people are sharing, we've had this successful pilot scheme, or we've recently raised X amount and we've been nominated for this award. Can we please vote for each other? And, people supporting each other on their to, people publicly supporting and endorsing each other on LinkedIn and sharing and tagging their coaches and other members of the DOHE community along the way, to even physically in person. We had our Tech Together events, which, as Dr. Yuliana mentioned, is an initiative that she's been driving at and has led with the organization, where we have people come together from the EdTech community. And we've, at our last event in November, we had, one of our startups who visited from Oman. We've had, some of our startups who are based, outside of London, outside of UK, almost 9, 10 that visited there. And we had our first end of year alumni lunch, and these are the kinds of things which are happening now, which a year ago or right at the start, we would have never imagined. So it's building slow, but it's building strong. And there is a big community that we are building together.
I think it's really refreshing to see that you went from thinking about KPIs, metrics, measurements, to really offering value and support and really thinking about what's important. So are there any other cases that you want to share with us in terms of how you see impact?
1 minute. Yes, I can share just a few, I think, just very quickly. So we've had some founders that have, pivoted from originally what they're working with, and that has been successful in its own right. So we've seen Emily from cohort 2 with Wholesome Tech, who's working with data, and she's raised over £700,000. We've had some founders who have continued with their approach. So, for instance, Myra Siddiqui from Chirag, that worked with you, Carmen. She has gone on to successfully fundraise, but also worked with even university level and government level projects. And we've had other founders and startups who are growing their teams and are, growing their operations and really actually reviewing their approach much more holistically. So it really does vary in terms of what they're working on next and what they're doing. But the key message is, which they can all have said unanimously, is that they recognize more than ever the power of community, the power of not just taking, but also giving back unconditionally and, supporting one another, which is very good to see.
Well, I think on those very uplifting words and message, I think we can finish here. And thank you so much for coming to share all the great work you're doing at DOHE.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting us. Thank you, Carmen.
Thank you, Carmen.
Well, I think it's really refreshing to see that you went from thinking about KPIs, metrics, measurements, to really moving on to continue offering value and support and really thinking about what's important.